Welcome to Walking with Jesus Bible Study. We're going to be in the book of Psalms, chapter 3, verse 8. Salvation belongeth unto the Lord. Thy blessing is upon thy people, saith. Salvation belongeth unto the Lord. Thy blessing is upon thy people, saith. We can only attain our salvation through Jesus Christ, through no one else and through nothing else. No one can save us but Jesus. Jesus Christ is the only one who made the payment for our sins. Our freedom was in the hands because Christ paid for it. He's the only one that took our punishment. Nobody else did. So we cannot find salvation in anything that has to do with any other person, anything on this earth, any worldly things. And it's only through him. Jesus said it himself. The only way to his Father is through him. The only reason that we can talk to God is through Jesus. Because it's through his righteousness that we are made righteous. Because we are not. We're sinners. We're unholy. We're unrighteous. We're a lot of evil. And even though, as we become Christians, we wash away all these things and we change the characteristics of us, we'll still never be holy. We'll still never be as righteous to come before God and to demand and to ask and to do all things. But through Jesus, we have that right. That's why it was said a lot of times in the Old Testament that, I shall surely die if God was to look upon me, if God was to speak to me. They was so afraid. Because nobody was holy enough. Nobody was righteous enough. And if he was to come before you, you would surely die. But he was sitting there. It was like, you didn't obey me. So now I am going to open up this earth and swallow you all up whole. That was what everybody knew. Because that's what he was doing. The thing about the Old Testament and the New Testament is that God's wrath. He was a God of war. He was a God of vengeance. He was setting boundaries. He was setting, respect. He was teaching his toddlers because he created us. And so therefore we did not know these things. He had to teach us as you would do, as a toddler does. No, you can't do that. No, you can't do this. You can't go here because you're going to get hurt. That is wrong. You can't do that. Our creation of us beings was still at a baby toddler stage that needed to be taught. But after being around for multiple generations, us human beings was old enough to know better and to understand and have heard the word and have heard, the laws of this and of that and how to act and should know better and got the concept of it. So therefore, he didn't have to be such a strict, hard parent, so to speak, and was able to come when Jesus came, was able to show the God of love, the God of mercy, the God of forgiveness, the God of peace. He had to show that other side of him through Jesus. And that's what's wrong with today's churches, is that when you tell the story, you got to tell both sides. They don't want to do that. Most people just want to read the New Testament. Most people just want to preach the New Testament. And so that's when you get all these people just thinking that God is all about this peace, love, and this turning Jesus into some kind of hippie and all this and that. And they forget that God is a serious man. He's a God. He's a just God. He's a God of wrath. He does do vengeance. And there's only so much that he will take. He doesn't like disobedience. So you got to teach both. There's got to be a balance. so that people can truly understand. You don't want to just speak all Old Testament and scare people to death and they know that God is not love or something, and you just don't want to just preach. You know, you got to teach both the mom and the dad. The father, you could say basically, is the Old Testament, and like the mother will be the New Testament, because Jesus came from an earthly mother, so you could say that is your nurturing parent. See, God is our parent. He created us. He is our mother and our father, and how we get that is through both the testaments. His father's side coming out more stern and more strict and guiding and setting the laws through the Old Testament, and then the nurturing and caring, but firm, mother type is coming from the New Testament. You can't just preach one without preaching the other. You're misleading the people, because they're only knowing half the truth. You got to speak the whole truth. If you can't speak the whole truth, then you shouldn't be speaking at all. If you can't preach both sides of the story, then why you bother preaching? Because you're leaving out every part, every detail is important. As we realize when we read this book, there's so much hidden things and so much meaning in each part, not just in each book, but in each verse, that you cannot leave out one thing. And just taking it for this one part is what people is getting it twisted and turning it to their own thing. And leaving it out means you don't want to hear this part and this part, which means you're trying to twist the word to fit your needs. Instead of living by the word, now you're going to live by what you want to. All that is doing is putting a teenager in charge. And we all know that when we do that, especially when you're in the household, you had a house full of kids, and the mom and dad went out and left the older sibling in charge, they may have followed the rules, but they're going to bend it to where they can do stuff and maybe the young ones can't. You can't do that. That's not following the rules. And that's where we have problems. That's where you get all these different base religions. Every one of them trying to be, and an adults trying to be like their father, except for they're just taking and leaving things out to bend to their way so they can get what they want and what serves them best instead of what serves Father best. And we can't do that, because in here, then that's when things start messing. There's a reason why he says the things that he says. This is just like the reason why your parents set rules and boundaries for a certain reason. We may not have understood it, especially when we was young at the time, but it was for our best interest, and we knew what was good. We may not could see what was going to happen the next day, but in generality, as a parent, you can guide somebody from that. We should be able to experience both the good and the bad from a nourishing parent. And the only reason why we would say it would be bad is because it's things that we don't want to do. Things that we don't think that we should have to do, or we don't have to listen because it just seems unfair. But here's the thing when it comes to that. First of all, he's God. He created all things. So whether we think it's right, wrong, fair, just, unjust, it doesn't matter what we think. We didn't create this world, and we didn't create everything in it, and we didn't create the people in it. So it doesn't matter what we say. It doesn't matter what we think. We are nobody to be saying, that's not right, that's not fair, and I don't believe that's right, and that's wrong. We're nobody to say that, because we didn't create anything. God created it all. But he's a just God. And just because we can't see the whole big picture doesn't make what we think is right. How can we know what's truly right? How can we know what's truly fair when we don't know the beginning nor the end? And see, there's only one person that knows the beginning and the end. And that's God. And that's why they call him the Alpha and the Omega. He's the only one. And we got to make sure we tell both sides of his story.